Hello, my name is Leung-Tat, and I'd like to welcome you to an hour-long sequence through Yin. Now, Yin is a more meditative practice. It is much slower than your regular vinyasa or power flow, and it's meant to complement your other forms of practice or exercise. And so on a very large scale, the purpose of Yin is to become acutely aware of how you feel when you sit in poses which may or may not be uncomfortable for you. And taking that out on a larger aspect will be when you're off the mat, exploring those same feelings that you're having or those same intentions that you're bringing to the mat off the mat as well. Yin is slower, and there are 4 tenets to the practice. So the first tenet of the practice is that you come into the pose and you explore your edge, or you play your edge, meaning that we're supposed to come to a point in the practice where you feel a sensation of about 3 to 5. So you want to try to stay away from being aggressive in the poses. And once you get to that point, you decide whether or not you can withstand a little more or whether or not you need to back out. And the whole idea is that you're coming into these shapes so that you can sit in it for about 3 to 5 minutes. The second tenet of the practice is once you come into the shape and you've gotten to your edge, then you begin to release the muscle around the bone. You become easy in the pose. You become still. The third tenet of the practice is that once you get to the shape and you become still, then you allow for time. And in sitting in these poses for longer periods of time, ideally from 90 seconds onwards, is that you're allowing for the sensation that's landing in your larger muscle group to then transfer to your connective tissue. And in your connective tissue, you want to try to create more movement. And so the process or the idea is that the body begins to have this reaction to your sitting in these poses for a longer period of time, and thus increases the hydration in these areas, mostly in our joints, and allows for easier movement after the practice. So let's begin by coming into a seated position, cross-legged, and you can choose to land on a blanket if that feels better in your body. And begin by coming into the space, coming onto your mat, relaxing your arms on your thighs, relaxing your shoulders, having a long spine here. And maybe you can close the eyes or come to a soft gaze. Begin to notice your breath. Notice the length of the inhales and the exhales. You may also notice the rhythm, even the texture, the temperature. As you begin to go inward, you might notice that you can hear the sound of your breathing behind your throat. It's known as the Ujjayi breath. I'm just taking a moment here to Land in a space of ease, bringing awareness to your heart space. Noticing the rise and fall in your chest as you begin to settle in. And then from here, you might want to flutter the eyes open. And so in our first shape, we're going to bring the soles of our feet to touch. And you might notice that the shapes that we're going to do today very much resembles what you would do in your regular practice. They might have a different name, and that's just meant to bring a different intention to the shape. So in your yang practice, for instance, this is known as Baddha Konasana, and in your yin practice, this is known as butterfly. And so you're going to bring the soles of the feet to touch, sort of navigating, just how close you want the soles of your feet to come in or out as you explore your edge. You might find that having your knees splayed open, you'd want some support here, so you can opt to take your blocks and place them directly under the knees so that your knees can feel supported in this shape. And then take a breath and slowly roll the spine forward. You might want to place the forearms down on your mat. Place your palms down. And begin to feel what it feels like to be in this shape. Now, when we get into different poses in the practice, the idea is that we're targeting different areas in the body. So you might find in this butterfly position that the inner groin might have some sensation. Maybe you're at a hip, maybe along your spine. And so can you just notice what you're feeling? Exploring the degree to which you're feeling that sensation and really keeping within that range of 3 to 5. So if you find that you're on a scale of, you feel 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, then I invite you to back away from that. You want to be able to sustain the shape. You want to be able to hold it for maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes. And so if you take the extreme version of the shape, then you might find that you're unable to hold it for a longer period of time. But also in stressing the tissue in a way that is aggressive, maybe counterintuitive to what we're trying to do in the practice. So as I mentioned earlier, the yin practice is more meditative. So if you find that your mind is just going all over the place, allow your breath to serve as an anchor to bring you back onto the mat. You really become a little more intimate with what is happening in your body. Slowly allow for the body to continue to melt forward as you find more space. And begin to check in with where you might still be holding tension. So notice if you might be clenching in the jaw, might be frowning. Can you allow yourself to release that? And so on the next breath, slowly begin to walk your hands back towards your feet, lifting up in the spine. Using your hands to gently close the knees in. Placing the blocks to the side. And so the fourth tenet of the practice is as you move from one pose to the next, being really gentle with your body. So we're going to come down onto the stomach. And I invite you to stack your hands one on top of the other, placing your forehead on your hands as the elbows splay open. And taking a moment to allow your body to reset in this prone shavasana position. You might notice as you come into this pose, it might be a feeling of relief, you might find that along your lower back area you find some release there. So just allowing yourself to take a moment in this resonance pose, allowing your body to reset. And then from here, I'm going to bring the forearms onto the mat. We're going to set up for Sphinx. And so in your Sphinx, you can bring the elbows under the shoulders, finding yourself into this back bend here. If this is too much, you can walk the hands out a little, bringing some release in the lower back area. If you find that when you're in this shape, you're not feeling too much, you can opt to bring your blocks and place your forearms on the blocks, bringing yourself into a deeper back bend here. But wherever you are on the mat, allow yourself to notice how you're feeling and deciding whether you need to back away a little or that you can stay here. So there are several options for you in this Sphinx or elevated Sphinx position. And then releasing the shoulders. And then notice if you might be clenching in the glutes. Can you allow yourself to release that? Coming into a soft and rhythmic breathing. Once again, noticing how quickly the mind is to become distracted when we're in these positions of stillness, where the mind doesn't want to feel a sensation, so the go-to is to become distracted and think about something else. And so the minute you realize that, allow yourself to come back into the space, come back into the present, come back into the now, and allow yourself to feel. And so you might be wondering, why do you need to feel? And the idea is that in almost befriending what's happening in your body and how your emotions are navigating that and how you're feeling it, you become more acquainted with your habitual way of dealing with things. For instance, where is your sensation right now? And then how is the mind trying to deflect from your feeling of that sensation? And then maybe as you think about being off the mat, is that your usual tendency when faced with anything that's uncomfortable to let the mind drift away and not have the feeling of what is coming up? So can you allow yourself to sit in stillness and internally explore more about you? And then from here on the next breath, if you had blocks, placing your blocks to the side, coming all the way down, allowing the arms to float down to the sides of your body. Let the palms face down. Maybe rest your head to the left or to the right, or maybe allowing the forehead to touch the mat. Take 2 cycles of breath here. And then from here, planting the palms alongside the ribs, you're going to tuck the toes and come up through table. And then send the hips back towards the heels, coming into a child's pose. Your version of a child's pose. So for some people, the knees are more comfortable when they're wide, and to others when they're closed. So sending the hips back towards the heels. Letting the forehead come to the mat. Extending the arms out in front of you. Releasing, letting go. Allow yourself to continue to be present on the mat, while really committing to activating your parasympathetic nervous system as we take it slowly. So one of the things that this practice does is, because we're going so slowly, you might notice a sense of calm as you use your breath. You might find that your heart rate is slower. And really what you're telling your body is that in this moment, everything is okay. And internally, your body can step away from being in fight or flight. I'm going to slowly roll the spine up from here. And come back to your table. And then you're going to bend that right forearm rested down onto the mat. Keep the hips positioned over the knees. And then lengthen the left arm. Float your torso down and maybe rest your forehead onto your right forearm. This is called quarter dog. So it's a version of puppy dog, but you're taking an asymmetrical approach to the shape. Getting some opening along the underside of the forearms, opening up in the shoulders. And so just notice where you're feeling the sensation. If you find that there's not much sensation happening, you can opt to take your block and let your hand rest on top of the block. There's also the option to flip onto the side of the palm. Maybe get a different sensation from this aspect of the pose. But you choose. It's your practice. Take what you want, leave what you don't. And really explore this from the aspect of you being a teacher in your own body. Continue to find your breath. And then slowly releasing that, pulling the left hand back, pushing yourself up, coming back into table. And we'll take a couple cat-cows here. So on the inhale, drop the belly, let the tailbone go up, and bring the heart forward. And then on the exhale, pushing the mat away, maybe bringing your chin into your chest. Arch in the spine. Take an inhale to cow. Drop in the belly. And then exhale to cat. And you can take a few more of these going at your own pace, allowing for the spine to get some movement. Using your breath to guide you. And not really being concerned with where we're going next, what is the next move, really remaining in your body. And then whenever that feels complete, coming back to your table, this time letting the left forearm come down to the mat, resting your forehead onto the forearm and extending that right arm out. Then you decide whether this works for you or whether you'd like to choose the other options of flipping onto the side of the palm or placing your hand on the block, or whether you're good right here. Really allowing yourself to experience the pose, feeling what it feels like in your body. Where do you feel the sensation? Have you explored your edge, and are you at 3 to 5? And then if you're there, can you release the gripping action as you come into stillness and allow for time to allow the body to respond in a way that's beneficial to the system? And then from here, you want to slide that right hand back, push the body up, come back to your table, come back to your neutral spine, take a breath. And so if you have a blanket, I would suggest for our next pose that you place the blanket down on your mat so that your knees are happy. And we're going to get into dragon. So in dragon, you're going to place the left knee on your blanket, walk the right leg to the top of the right corner of your mat, and begin easing into this shape. Now you can use your blocks. You can place the blocks so that they frame your right foot, and you begin to lengthen and look up and feel the extension in that left quad. If this isn't working for you, you can bring the blocks to the inside. Walk the right foot a little bit to the upper corner. You find that you begin to sink a little more in that left hip area, and you can place the blocks high or you can place them low. Again, your practice. And let the forearm come down. And maybe feel if this feels differently and is more accessible for you. And so in dragon, you'll find that maybe your left hip joint is beginning to have a conversation with you. If you find that you're on the 7, 8, or 9 trajectory, I encourage you to back away. Pay attention to what are you feeling in your knees, because we don't want any sort of pain or tingling sensation. So if you find that there's anything happening in your knees, be sure to release that. And as always, even though we're in these shapes for a certain time, you're in your own body. So I encourage you, if you find that you absolutely can't hang out here, then allow yourself to release a little bit. It means that you've gone too far. But once you're in a space where you can sustain the pose, then calling on to all the other tenets of the practice. So beginning to any extent to release the muscle around the bone, becoming still, exploring the pose internally. Maybe find different ways to soften. How are you doing? From here, you want to send that left hip back. Allow that right leg to extend and come into this half split. You can use your blocks or you can use your hands, whatever helps you to feel most supported. Allow the body to fold over. Let the toes point up. Feel the sensation that's arising, maybe in the hamstrings, maybe in the back of the calf here. And again, unless it's painful and unbearable, hang out. Allow for time to help distribute and direct that sensation in a way that is beneficial to your tissues. And then slowly releasing that rebending, and then sending that right leg back. We're going to bring that left leg forward. We're going to set up for dragon on the other side. So bringing the left leg forward, your knees or your left knee is over your ankle. Begin to sink on the right side to get some stretch in the quad area, the right quad, and then decide where you want to land in the shape. So maybe it's right here. Maybe it's placing the blocks on the inside. Maybe it's lowering onto the blocks once you place them on the inside. And as you begin to mindfully go through each of your shapes, you might notice that in this one body that you have, there are differences on either side. And so this might feel different on this side than it did on the right. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just noticing it and observing how the body is different. And then when you think about taking these things off the mat as well, understanding that if in your own body things can be different, then when you go off the mat into the world, expect that as well and be willing to be open to that. I don't know about you, but on this right side, I am having a lot of conversation in my quads and in my hip area. And so the whole purpose of sitting in these shapes for longer periods of time is so that we can get the connective tissue as we positively stress it to begin to lengthen. And it's this idea of when we are sitting in the shapes, we're allowing for them to, almost like a sponge, begin to squeeze and detoxify. And so the longer we stay in the shape, you could think about it as the more toxins get released. And then as we release, so begin by sending this left hip back, the tissue comes back into its original shape, but with that, it gathers even more fluid and becomes more hydrated. And the whole idea is that we begin to become more mobile in the areas where the connective tissue could be more dense. So as you come into this half split, you can walk your blocks back, you can place your hands on the mat, whatever feels good in your body, and then allow for the torso to release so that your head is going in the direction of that left knee. And let the toes flip up, landing in this half split. And so it's this idea of us trying to counteract the constant sitting and the poor habitual practices that oftentimes lands in our bodies and we don't even think about it. And so being able to give your body all that it needs to consider better health and easier movement in the areas where we don't usually target in our regular practices. And slowly release from your half split. Bring that left leg back. We're going to come into fire log pose. You might want to place your blanket and so you're going to bring that right leg so that it's stacked, that left leg, sorry, so that it's stacked onto the right. So to any degree, you can square your legs. If you're coming into this form, you might want to place another blanket so that your heels are supported, right? So we said right leg below, left leg on top. And then figure out what you need. Maybe you'd like a blanket right here to support the left knee, folding open. Do you feel okay? And then from there, let's begin to walk the hands out. Slowly. no agenda. And take a breath and release, folding over. Letting the head hang here. Allow yourself to come back to the mat. And pick up residence in your body. And feel and notice and become aware. Release the shoulders. Are you in your 3 to 5 range? Once again, if you think you've gone too far back away. Again, coming back into the space. Each time you feel like the mind is absent and off to a list or things to do or things of the past or things in the future, can you allow it to come back to the present? Come back to the mat. Come back to the sensation. Come back to your body. And come back to you. Slowly walk the hands so that you begin to lengthen in the spine. We'll take this on the other side. So slowly unwrap the legs. Bring the feet down onto the mat. And maybe you'd like to windshield wipe slowly, placing the hands behind the back. Just beginning to slowly roll from side to side. So a couple times. And then this time, letting your left leg be the bottom leg. Let your right leg be the top leg. Coming into your square pose or fire log pose on the other side. Noticing what you might need. How is this side different from the other side? And then allowing the hands to walk forward. Getting to your edge. And then releasing the spine, releasing the head, neck and shoulders, lowering down to any extent. And if you find that this is not groovy, you can always stack your blocks, placing them in front of you and resting your forehead there. Find ways in which you can still come to a sensation and still sustain the pose. Notice if you might be gripping anywhere in your glutes, along your hips. Are you clenching tightly so that you can hold the shape? And if so, can you allow for some release and some space? And then walking the hands back up. And from here, we're going to come onto our backs. So you can place your blocks aside. You can place the blanket off to the side as well. And come to lie on your back. Taking it slowly, you might notice that feeling of fragility, sensation still arising. And take a moment here to allow the body to reset. Take a couple cycles of breath. And then from here, you want to lift the hips and just bring it over to the left side. Extend the legs and then walk the legs over to the right side of your mat. Allow the arms to be overhead and you can clasp at the elbows, you can hug the elbows, or you can grab on to your left wrist with your right hand. And begin scooting the upper part of your body over to the right as well. And so maybe if you were to look at yourself from above, you might find that you look like a banana. And so this pose is called Banana Asana. Sometimes I like to cross the left leg over the right. And then begin to release. So you should feel a nice extension along the left side body here. Might feel some compression along the right, and that's okay. As long as your sensation is still in the 3 to 5 range or not in the 9 and 10. Back away, strivers. In the yin practice, less is more. And although we've been conditioned to think otherwise, going to the extreme in these shapes will cause more harm than good. So be patient with yourself and be mindful in how you're landing in this shape at this time. Can you release in the shoulders? And then from here, you want to walk through center. So unwrapping the legs if they were wrapped, bringing the legs back to center, bringing your body back to center, realigning so that you are back with your hips in the mid area. And then whenever you're ready, you can bend at the knees, lift the hips and gently tilt it over to the right. Extend the legs and walk the legs over to the left side of your mat. This time, floating the upper part of your body over to the left. Grabbing onto your right wrist with your left hand, or bending at the elbows and grabbing onto both elbows. Maybe you want to cross the right leg over the left leg. Feeling for what sensation is coming up there and to what degree you're at. And then when you're in the range where you can sustain the pose, beginning to release, let go. Coming back onto the space, onto the mat, into your body. And then slowly coming back to center. Bringing your hips back to center, bringing the upper part of your body back to center, bringing your legs back to center. And then bending at the knees. You might want to hug the knees into the chest here. And you can roll from side to side. Releasing on the lower back area. And then from here, extending the legs out and setting up for your Shavasana. And in your Shavasana, that can mean grabbing onto your blanket, grabbing onto your eye pillow. Maybe if you have socks. And lying on your back. Giving yourself time to connect with the earth. Maybe placing a blanket across your hip. Maybe completely covering in your blanket as you settle into your Shavasana. Maybe resting your legs on blocks. Whatever your mode of ending your practice is, begin to take that now. Might close your eyes. And so I invite you here to begin to come to your breath in the same way that you did in the beginning. Noticing the rise and fall of your chest as you take your inhales and exhales. Maybe as you're inhaling, taking in anything that your body needs. Goodness, love, peace, resolve. And maybe as you exhale, releasing anything that doesn't serve you in this moment. Tension, weariness. And maybe doing a full body scan as you begin to melt into the mat, onto your space, begin to let go, knowing that Shavasana is just as important as any of the other poses that we took. So you begin to allow the body to integrate everything that has occurred, bringing rest and renewal. Begin to let go, let your bones get heavy, let your feet flop open, and allow yourself to rest in your Shavasana. Begin to make small movements with your hands and with your feet, bringing awareness back into your body. And in your own time, you can come to one side and take a pause. And then lift up, coming into a seated position. As you do so, lengthen in the spine, adjust your crown. You can bring your hands to heart, or you can bring one hand to your heart and one hand to your stomach. The light in me sees and honors the light in each of you who practiced with me today. May the good energy of this practice sustain us in peace, happiness, and good health. Thank you so much for practicing with me. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Namaste.